That push includes proposals to grant them constitutional roles, like giving them a voice in policy matters and a platform to represent the interest of their people.
But of course, it's not without its questions. How do we strike a balance between traditional institutions and modern democratic structures? Now, what about accountability and extent of their powers?
Big question still. Advocates say formalizing their role could strengthen local governance, protect our cultural heritage, and speed up development at the grassroots.
So, I welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria today, and here we will try to unpack the issues that shape our nation's future. Today we'll be taking a look at a topic that could reshape governance in Nigeria, and that's, of course, the proposed constitutional role of traditional rulers.
Should they be formally empowered to do more than just preserve culture? That's a question. And can they be key players in development? We'll hear from experts and stakeholders on the program. I am Ademola Adeoye. Great to have you join us.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak. It's always a pleasure to have you join us on the program, and we're live on the network service of the NTA. As always, Chukwujoko Digbaja will be joining us quite shortly for the newspaper review. But first, let's catch up with highlights of the morning news with Stella in America.
Thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. To begin our conversation this morning on the proposed constitutional role for traditional rulers, here is background report put together by our correspondent, Oyeyemi Ajayi.
Over time, traditional rulers are referred to as custodians of culture and values. They are major voices at the grassroots with utmost power and authority over the people, with useful roles in mediating between the people and the government, enhancing national identity, resolving minor conflicts, and providing an institutional safety valve for often inadequate state bureaucracies. For some time, their roles in the society have been of contention, with some emphasizing the need for reviews while others canvassed the creation of a constitutional role for traditional rulers in the country. This explains why a bill seeking to establish the National Council for Traditional Rulers scaled second reading in the Senate. The main objective of the proposed legislation is to proffer on monarchs and heads of communities in the country specific constitutional roles. The bill, sponsored by a former governor of Plateau State, Senator Simon Bako Lalong, says the traditional rulers should be held responsible when issues arise in their communities. Hence, they should be charged with responsibilities where they will be committed to, especially in the challenging area of security. Some, however, believe that giving traditional rulers specific constitutional roles at the local level is likely to bring them in conflict with elected local government officials. The issue of financial allocation for such functions will pose an additional challenge, and that is why it is believed they should stay as custodians of traditional institutions and culture rather than being involved in governance, except in clearly defined advisory roles. Now, with all these, what major impact will it make if the proposed constitutional roles for traditional rulers eventually scale through? A major question our guests in the studio will be answering shortly.
Oyeyemi Ajayi, thank you very much for that very robust background, and of course you've put us to the task this morning, and we're very glad to have an array of distinguished traditional rulers here with us right in the studio, and of course some of others joining us via Zoom. But let me begin the introductions from here in the studio, and I'd like to start with His Highness Justice Lawal Hassan, OFR, Emir of Gumi, Zamfara State, and he's right here with us in person. Your Highness, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have right here in the studio His Royal Majesty Igwe Sir Samuel Ikechukwu Asadu, Ogadagidi of Edemane, Ogogo Asian Kingdom, and Soka, and he's also chairman Enugu State Traditional Rulers. I would like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much. I'm honored.
And also here in the studio with us is His Eminence Engineer Dr. Eberechukwu Oji, Ezearo of Arochukwu Kingdom. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, joining us from our Jos studio in Plateau State is Senator Simon Bako Lalong. Is a senator representing Plateau South Senatorial District and former governor of Plateau State. Good morning, Senator. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Nigeria.
Good morning, Yemi. Good morning, Claire. And good morning, Nigerians. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us, we have from Asaba Delta State, His Majesty Obi Professor Epiphany Azinge, SAN, the Asagba of Asaba. Your Royal Highness, you are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Good to have you.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Demola. I'd like to begin, since we're looking at constitutional responsibilities for traditional rulers, and I'd just like to start with distinguished Senator Simon Bako Lalong, who also was a former governor of Plateau State. And I'm just wondering why you think now is the time to accord, some form of constitutional or legal powers to the traditional institutions.
Very much clear. And once again, good morning, viewers. It started when I was the chairman of the Northern Governors Forum. You remember there were crises here and there. And part of our resolutions each time we met in Kaduna was to find solutions to some of these crises. And I recall vividly that we had a very good presentation from our Council of Chiefs, ably led by His Eminence, the Sultan of Sokoto. Part of it was we must not be doing the same thing every time and be expecting a different result. Let's also accommodate these traditional rulers, accommodate their views. It was as a result of that a committee was set up, ably led by Senator Lawan, who was then Senate President. And part of those who formed the team were also the Justice, retired Justice of Supreme Court, Justice Sidi Bage, now Emir of Lafia, who also was in charge of drafting a bill to ensure that we have a role for traditional rulers. That was a bill that was submitted at the 9th Assembly. Unfortunately, it fell. Now we came back again. And now, as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, one of now my rule by traditional rulers was, why can't we? What was wrong? Why can't we represent that bill? In the course of our campaigns, I remember as the Director General of campaign, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Shetima, we met with traditional rulers. And again, these views were put in to Mr. President. Let us adopt this, create a role constitutionally for traditional rulers at the end of the day and see what role they will do in addressing insecurity in Nigeria. So as quickly as possible, as we convened in the Senate, I brought back some of these views and then put it in the law form. Today, it has scaled through in the Constitutional Amendment Committee as first reading. It has already gone through, which is under the able leadership of Senator Barrow, His Excellency Senator Barrow, the Deputy Senate President. But then, part of the condition is that you cannot go and do alteration without even a bill. So the bill, to ensure that the roles are defined, is what we are now working on at the Senate. It has also passed the first reading, is going into second reading for deliberations. And that deliberations is the committee hearing. After the committee hearing is the third reading. So this is where we are.
Your Excellency, for giving us the genesis of the bill there. We'll get back to you later in the course of this conversation. But let's come back to the studio and let me just ask His Highness Justice Lawal Hassan, OFR, Emir of Gumi, Zamfara State. We know that before the advent of the colonial masters, the traditional institutions, did a lot when it comes to governance and the cultural heritage. What has changed, actually? Can you just give us a little bit of background, the role of the traditional institutions before the advent of the colonial masters, and what changes have occurred in their roles till date?
Well, thank you, Damola. Before the advent of the colonial powers, everyone knows that in all our communities in Nigeria, the traditional rulers were, I may put it, were the government. When I say government, quote unquote, I mean they were exercising legislative, executive, and judicial powers. In the north, you have first-class emirs referred to as Sarkinyanka. That means he had full executive powers to the extent that if a person is convicted of a capital offense, for instance, and the matter goes through the full trial, finally it culminates before the Sarki. The Sarki had the final authority to say, execute him.
Okay.
That is the concept of Sarkinyanka. Now, this is just to put it in context to show you the enormous powers that traditional rulers were exercising in those times before the advent of colonial masters. And when those adventurers came into our shores, what they did was to say, first of all, let us emasculate, let's take away these enormous powers from these people. These are the leaders of the people. If we can emasculate them, if you can take away their powers, then of course the followers they'll just follow. So that's what they did, that's what happened. And unfortunately, after the colonial powers left, again, the political leadership of that time, when they came, they also realized that, they didn't understand the main function of traditional leaders after the colonial powers had left was to assist the political leadership in making sure that there's good governance. That's all traditional rulers in Nigeria, whether from the north, south, east, wherever, their main concern is to make sure there is proper and good governance. But some people misunderstand that. They think that we are vying for powers. We are vying for authority. We are not interested in all that. What we want is to see that our people actually are governed in the best sense of the word, governance. They get all the goodies, if I may use the word goodies, if they get all the goodies of government. So what they did, they set up various panels, starting from the panel in 1976. There was local government reform in 76, in which that was the beginning when they started to chip off the powers of the traditional institutions. For instance, they took away the kings then used to have, as I said earlier, they controlled the police, they controlled we call them NTA police, they controlled the courts and the prisons. So the political leadership, when they came with that reform in 76, they gradually chipped off all these powers. The emir or the king was no more in control of the police, he was no more in control of the prison, he was no more in control of the courts. So he was just sitting. He was just sitting.
Just a stool.
Just a stool. He was just sitting there. Now, but any time there is trouble in the land, the people, the ordinary people, they don't know anybody. It's only their king they know. So when there is trouble, you see people, trooping to the palaces, and they go there and lay their complaints. And we find ourselves hamstrung. We don't have, what can we do? So at best, we now go to the political leadership, whether it is the governor, whether it is the chairman of the local government, whatever. And we say, look, you have to come and do something. Look at all these people, complaining. And so that's where we are. Then again, in 1996, another set of reforms also were conducted, and those ones also now finally nailed the coffin.
Okay, your Royal Majesty, Justice Hassan, just for clarifications, so just like you to clarify for us at what point exactly that the traditional institution, lost its powers, because we keep talking about the colonialists. I don't want to say colonial masters, the colonialists. We keep, referencing, their time, but we know that in part of the northern, region, then, the traditional institution was subsumed under, the colonial policy. So indirectly, the traditional rulers were also, also had their powers, were used by the. It may not be so in other parts of the country.
Right.
So at what point? Is it at the point of the colonialists or at the point of a democratic transition?
Okay, very good question. When the colonialists came to the north, they realized they found a full government in place. The kings had the courts, they had the alkali courts, we had the prison system, we had the police. Everything was in order, and we actually had the king in council. So the colonialists said, well, what are we coming? Everything is just like in our own country. So what they did was they introduced what they called the indirect rule. They had earlier practiced this indirect rule in a far place, in India. They did it. They used the Maharajas and that's the kings in India. They used them indirectly to rule, to govern India. Of course, everyone knows India is a very complex society with a huge population and different castes, different people, just like we have in Nigeria. We have a huge country, we have different tribes, and so they said, well, let's use what we use in India here in Nigeria. So what they did was they said, okay, look, they go to the Sultan and tell the Sultan, this year we want everybody to pay 6 pence tax. 6 pence, penny, and there are pennies and pence, So this year we want everybody to pay 6 pence as tax. The Sultan will now call the people down the pecking order. All right, the colonial administrators, the white man had said, this is what they want. That word will go round up to the ward head, who has the duty of the actual collection of the taxes, take it now to the district head. The district head will now forward it to the emirate, to the emir. The emir will now also forward it to the Sultanate Council. That was what was happening before. And as you said, to come back to the question, the point at which these powers were taken away, eroded, was in 1976 local government reforms. At that point, they decided the emirs and the kings and the chiefs should have nothing to do with either the police, the courts, or any kind of local government administration. And they came up with the concept of a chairman of a local government with elected councillors. Actually, there was a time a kind of hybrid system was in operation in the north, and I know about it. The hybrid was, they would say the local chief, or rather the emir, was the chairman of the local government, unelected. And then the councillors with whom he is to work are going to be elected. Now, it worked. It's a good system, if you ask me, because no king, no emir no chief in this country would connive with anyone to misappropriate or to misdirect or to misapply the funds that had been set aside for the use of his people.
Your Majesty, I think we'll just allow you to take some rest.
All
I
right.
will also get
So,
the views, yes.
Yes, let's get to His Majesty Igwe Samuel Ikechukwu Asadu. Is it the same scenario that we had in the north? Is there a difference?
There's no much different because the colonialists came in and then they found out that they could divide and conquer. So they used they was very smart, of course. We were looking up to them as people who had the Midas touch. And guess what? They did all these things and we were able to be carried along at that stage. Just like the Justice said, my colleague, he said these are things that we needed to look into. And along the line, those powers were eroding. So in the East, they used the chiefs.
Okay.
And the chiefs who are, they had power, they had executive powers. So I wouldn't repeat all the things he said, but he applied for the same because it was the same. Remember, it was 1914 when the Lagos Protectorate or the Nigerian concept was made. So those people that came in the law, look at them. They used the facts of the people they met in the area, and then they had to appoint some of them as actually leaders of the people. And they knew that they were very close to the people. They knew about the security concept. They knew about who is who. They knew the personalities that make up the community. They were so in touch with the people. And then just like we're discussing, the powers keep eroding small from Obasanjo's 1976 local government reform till 1999, when it's actually missing. And you can tell the amount of professionalism that is inside the Traditional Rulers Council. Look at every aspect of life is covered. Very smart people.
Yeah.
Name it, we have it. So somebody like me, I have no idea that we don't have a constitutional rule. So it's a call for a clarion call that these are changes, and the changes are supposed to be constant. So we need to be imbibing changes. We understand the effect of the not being included in all these things. Now we understand what the politicians' intentions are, that they're supposed to be the chief executive officers of the states, of local government, of the country. We appreciate them. And so we have to begin to learn to adapt to change, because change is constant, be it in climate, be it in society, be it in governance, be it in in affairs of even the family units. So we want to thank these people that Senator Excellency Lalang, and we want to thank His Excellency the President of the Federal Republic. We want to thank all the state governors. We want to thank the sponsor of this bill, House of Representatives Speaker and the Deputy Speaker for their input in this. It's a time that we need to discuss this. This is now or never. What I mean, not never in a military way. It's just like, okay, it's something that we need to apply because
it's not expedient.
Yeah, the country will benefit from it. So we have to leave this country better than we met it. That's my message always. Okay. So, but we have to accept changes, and the changes are constant. We just have to embrace it. If not, then we'll be swept. Things. So, but now we're prepared. I'm glad it has passed to the second reading in the Senate. We're gracious enough to have this His Excellency, the former governor of Plateau State, to quarterback this. So he's actually doing a good job.
We will look at the content of the bill presently, but let's just establish the fact that, and that's why I want to bring in His Eminence Dr. Oje into this conversation. And I'm just wondering, the traditional institution already had, ab initio had its responsibilities and rules cut out by our culture and our tradition. Do you really need to enshrine your roles into a constitution for you to perform, your responsibilities to the state?
So the answer to that question, thanks Claire for asking that question. So the answer to that is yes. And the reason you say yes is we have the doctrine of necessity, which basically says when events occur, then that brings out the necessity to look into facts. Yes, traditional rulers have their role cut out for them. Our people ascribe these responsibilities to us. Our people revere traditional institutions, and they do that just by their love for the throne, their love for their traditional rulers, their respect for the throne, their respect for their traditional rulers. And we are able to function, interact with our people, and do all the things that the people expect from us as custodians of the custom of the people, to ensure that there is peace, to maintain the interface between our people and the elected officials, to carry the message and the voice of our people when the need arises. However, as my colleagues have explained, when your role doesn't have legal backing, when your role doesn't have constitutional recognition, you run the risk that you could do something and somebody says, why did you do that? I think that's really where the point is.
But he also talked about, sorry to interject, he
Sure.
also talked about at the time when there was a hybrid, and it worked. So can't we, reinvent that hybrid, where the traditional institutions also collaborated with the democratic institutions like the police. And I say this because there was a time, when I was growing up, there was an incident somewhere, somebody had made away with something and nobody, agreed. And they approached the traditional ruler. And the traditional ruler said, they brought out certain things and said, okay, whoever did it, if you pass here, this will happen to you. and that happened. And in our eyes, the person who made away with the thing started, eating grass. Yes, confessing and all that. And immediately he was apprehended and taken to the police. So can't we have the traditional institution back in that hybrid state?
Thank you, Claire. I think you make the point that we always say that, we have to evolve the kind of governance and leadership structure that works for us as Africans. There are things that have kept our society. There are things that have preserved us, that is unique to us as a people. And that's why we are saying that for purposes of uniformity across all the geopolitical zones of Nigeria, a constitutional recognition of traditional rulers is important. And now is the time. That's all we are saying. This bill, and really thanks to Senator Lalong, former governor of Plateau State, for being our champion at this time. Yes. Really, the point is, it's just a constitutional recognition. There's really no powers in that bill, and we'll come to it so now it's just constitutional recognition. So if somebody asks a traditional, why are you doing that? Oh, the constitution recognizes that we carry these roles, even though we are performing the roles now, just by the tradition of our people and the expectation of our people. But I think it's important that these things are documented, recognized, for the sake of our children in future. So all I'm saying is that you have made a very important point, which is that our governance, our leadership, and the structure of making sure that there is peace in our communities needs to evolve. And having things that are unique to us, recognizing our uniqueness, recognizing the legacies that our forefathers have passed to us, which is this traditional institution, we should preserve it. The powers are eroded, yes, but we can do better. And this bill, as it is now, simply said, recognize your traditional rulers constitutionally, and then you can stop at that. I think our children will fight for it.
It may not be as simple as you think. When we look at the nitty-gritty of it.
Oh, okay. All right, let's just go to Asaba now, where we have the Asagba of Asaba that we were talking about, His Majesty Obi, Professor Epiphany Azinge, SAN. Your Majesty, I just want to get your perspective on what we have been discussing so far, and how do you think that this proposed constitutional amendment or whatever will be able to balance traditional and modern governance structure?
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, let me commend all the earlier speakers for articulating very excellently. Also to posit that this is a welcome development in terms of the bill proposed and the stages it has passed in the Senate and in the National Assembly. Let me quickly state that there is nothing new in what is being proposed. Constitutional evolution in Nigeria recognizes the fact that we have passed through this road before. So for us, it is not an uncharted territory or terrain. His Highness Emir of Gumi has eloquently elucidated the position pre-colonial and a colonial era, but we must also have it at the back of our mind that constitutionally, we have also had traditional functions assigned to traditional rulers. In the Republican era, 1960-1963, we had a House of Chiefs, and there were prescribed roles assigned to them. And chiefs in this context presupposes traditional rulers. And this went on until the advent of military in governance. And from 1967, when the unitary government of General Ironsi came into power, that was the beginning of the erosion of the functions, constitutional functions of traditional rulers. Again, followed by the 1976 local government reforms. But even at that, with the 1979 Constitution, we also had some modicum of roles assigned to traditional rulers constitutionally. Only the 1999 Constitution, put everything in abeyance. So what is being proposed is nothing novel. It is nothing unique. What we should be saying is that there should be a return to constitutional roles for traditional rulers. It is nothing novel, like I said. And I believe that from 1999 till date, we have seen the relevance, the significance, the importance that the traditional institutions have played in maintaining the balance as far as the governance structure of this country is concerned. And this is something that we can never run away from. All that should be before us is how do we maintain this balance? In the light of the fact that we have the local government council as the third tier of government, wherein lies the roles for the traditional rulers. Are we going to have them again as we had them in the 60s, as a house playing legislative functions as well? Or do we need to carve out a special role for them, wherein they can also exercise a modicum of both legislative and executive powers? To say that we should have constitutional role, for me, it should not be restricted to our advisory capacity. It should go beyond that. There should be a constitutional imprimatur in what is being done by traditional rulers, because the country seems to have recognized the fact that they are playing a very wonderful role in trying to stabilize the polity, trying to ensure that peace reigns all over the country. And we always notice that when the chiefs are down, the people in government always resort to them and call upon them to help them to stabilize the polity. So for me, this is just a question of how do we strike a balance? And I believe that it is not just striking a balance, it is ensuring that something fundamental is achieved through this bill so that we set up exactly what we're asking for, a constitutional role. So for me, what before us is to work out the modalities. Whether there should be a constitutional role or not, it's not the question. Because for me, the answer is purely in the affirmative. There should be constitutional role. If not, then people may think that they are laboring in vain and they may not commit themselves totally to the functions that has been ascribed to them, and they cannot continue to function the way they are functioning as custodians of the culture of their people, the values of their people, and also custodians of the environment in which they found themselves. So for me, let us work out the modalities and see how we can take it further by trying to strike this balance as the need arises.
Sir, His Royal Majesty Professor Epiphany Azinge, thank you very much. And let's also, I mean, they say, you know, belated wishes are mostly cherished. Let's use this platform to once again congratulate you on your ascension. We'll return to you, you know, Professor Azinge, SAN. But let's get back to Jos and, you know, to bring in distinguished Senator Simon Bako Lalong. And I'm just wondering if we're to now mainstream the traditional institution into the governance, you know, democratic architecture that we have now, what are the prayers of this bill? What are the specific responsibilities that you are praying the National Assembly, you know, to approve? And I'm just wondering, would it be advisory, or would it have some, you know, legislative powers?
Thank you very much. First of all, also contributed along the contributions of these eminent traditional rulers. Now, there are some questions that people ask. Why are you bringing the military in attending to civil unrest in Nigeria? Why did we bring them out of the barracks? What were the roles of the police? What were the roles of traditional institutions? At the time you brought out military, because we were thinking that crisis or insecurity was moving towards modern warfare. We brought out military. Today they are everywhere, but we've not found results. I will say found results because we are still battling with it. Today, it is not the same system, it's not the same traditional institutions. The last man that spoke is a distinguished jurist. I'm a lawyer. Director General of the Nigerian Advanced Legal Studies for several years before he retired. Today he's traditional ruler. He said he should go and be answerable to a local government chairman. One of it, the Sultan, is a retired general. So many of the generals are now retired. They are traditional rulers. The Emir of Lafia is a retired jurist of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. He's going to be answerable to a local government chairman. He's going to be answerable to a local government chairman. Talk of all of them that are seated here. The Emir of Gumi, a retired justice, Court of Appeal, and so many people, so many generals that are moving into it. Now, we are not taking advantage of these resources. We are not taking advantage of these retired brains moving back. And you say they are only going to be given advisory. That's the answer now that you are talking about. They want a constitutional rule. It's beyond advisory. What we've been doing is advisory. You go and say he's only going to advise a local government chairman. If he likes, he takes it. If he likes, he doesn't take it. But if you prescribe certain advisory, certain rules for them, constitutional rules, they are not going to say they are taking away all the functions of a local government chairman or functions of a governor, but it's going to be complementary. Today we have Council of States. Council of States is a collection of former this, former that, former presidents of Nigeria, former justices of, why are bringing them? Because at a point, one time or the other, you think that these people have, I will say, a basket of ideas, experiences that they want to give the federal government. And yet we are wasting these ones and keeping them to advise and even not providing enough funds. I was a governor. The funds are not enough to even make them do that, work. In some cases, you find out that it is even difficult for them to operate, depending on the political leadership in that place. It's making it difficult, very frustrating for them to operate. Yet, when there are crises the first place that they will start going is to assemble traditional rulers and ask them, how did it happen? How are we going to cope this crisis? So if we are talking of how did it happen, how are we going to cope this crisis, that is asking that we must create that constitutional rule, create that constitutional rule. So the fears everywhere, and I'm very happy that at the time that I'm not trying to preempt what will happen during the public hearing. When we went into the second reading, if you see the kind of contributions, everybody was contributing for it, because we are all beginning to realize that everything is beginning to get hopeless. As I'm sitting, I came in to have a break and fell into a crisis in Plateau State. It is traditional rulers that are moving here and there, Even the army that is there is relying on the advices of traditional rulers. Of course, we are praying that it will not happen again in Plateau State, and may the souls of those who lost their lives rest in peace. So this is what we are saying. If we keep on saying we are talking of constitutional changes every time, constitutional amendment, what are we talking about traditional rulers? Can't we have that and go back and create that rule and see whether it will work or not? For me, there is no need saying that you are relying on the army, you are relying on the proliferation of more agencies of security without going back to the roots. Let's try the roots. This is where we are going. It's not going to be in conflict. There is no conflict about it. But for me, I think we must do that, create a role and hold them responsible.
Let me ask you again. You were the executive governor in Plateau State for 8 years. To what use did you put the traditional institution, and how effective was it in maintaining or promoting peace in Plateau during your tenure?
Claire, you remember I will always say it, that some of the things we lay down as panacea for peace in Plateau was the creation of the Peace Building Agency. It was not issue of army, Peace Building Agency. The Peace Building Agency came from advice of the traditional institutions. It was a mixture of opinions of traditional institutions, and which was supported by NGOs, even the United Nations, which created the first peace building agency on the plateau. So that peace agency was working tightly, closely with traditional institutions. In all the traditional institutions, all of them, anything that was going to happen there. Because if you are looking for foundation, if you are looking to trace who is a criminal, you will go back to his village. The traditional ruler will tell you the background of his family. They will tell you who are bad ones and the good ones in that place. So this was what we were doing. As early as possible, we tried to get in every village which ones are the bad ones. The traditional ruler will tell us in confidence. And that through the peace building agency will move about. At a point, I also expanded the scope of the peace building agency to involve the inter-advisory council. The inter-advisory council of the plateau was a mixture of traditional institutions and religious leaders. All of them were part of it. All the heads of religious organizations in plateau were all part of this advisory council because they work together. And of all of them, I made sure that each of them I was going to hold responsible, depending on where the crisis was coming from. With that, we had a lot of advantages in curbing some of these crises. So, but today, well, I don't want to. My friend Wike will say, "Day your day, and let the other person day his day." I don't want to say I'm getting myself into administration of somebody else, But if we look at this critically, and with this array of brains, you have seen them. This is just a few of what we are picking. All of them, you can't say that they don't have the experiences. All of them, you can't say they don't have the background. All of them, you can't say that they are not people that are of integrity. Then why are we not using them? Why are we not using them? We will say it is constitutional role. How it fell the other time is what we are doing today to make sure that this law will not fail. All politicians will go and acquire traditional title. Our president has about 3 or 4, I think so many. But the few ones that he's using is Aswaju, and also Jagaban. All these titles were given by traditional rulers, and he has a lot of respect for the for traditional titles. If there is a respect for traditional titles, there is respect for traditional rulers. Let us create that respect and provide a role for them so that we can use to cope insecurity and also modernize or enhance our governance system.
Distinguished Senator Lalon, thank you so much. That there is need for us to create a role for them to ensure stability in our polity. Let us come back to the studio, and we still have His Highness Justice Lawan Hassan, the Emir of Gumi. I mean, from your experience, because a lot of people have expressed the fear that most of the issues in this country now are being politicized. You know, there's this politicization of that this institution also will become will go the same way. Now, what advice would you, if you are to have input into this proposed constitutional role, what will be your input? And how to maintain, the credibility of the traditional institutions?
Well, Demola, let's first try to isolate the most pressing problems that we have in the in the local government areas. Basically, we are talking of growing insecurity. Now, how do you checkmate that insecurity? There's virtually nothing that we haven't tried under the sun. Like you had Senator Lalong mention a few minutes ago, they brought in the military, they did everything, they tried what they call the kinetic, non-kinetic approaches and everything but still we are grappling with the insecurity. My take is, there is something they call the security vote, which governors and chairmen of local government have access to. They are supposed to use that security vote, as the name implies, for purposes of enhancing the security of the areas they govern. Mm-hmm. But we all know that is not what is happening. We all know that most people who have access to that kind of vote use it for other purposes, for some purposes other than security. Now, my advice is, or my opinion is, if you are going to use a kind of, if we are going to give some role distinct from purely advisory role, get the traditional institution to be involved in the governance of the areas where they are sited, then you have to go back to the issue I referred to earlier, that is the hybrid. For instance, you can say in each local government, the chairman of the foremost traditional leader in that local government should be the chairman, and then you elect democratically elected councillors, and then those two now form the government of that local government. And then you may need to change the nomenclature, and apart from calling it local government, call it area government, call it local. For instance, Port Harcourt area government, and then the huge resources that you are to use for purposes of security are now under the direct control, not control, under the, how do I put it now?
The supervision?
The supervision of the foremost traditional ruler of that area. He is not, he wouldn't put his hand in the, day-to-day running of the finances, but no expenditure will take place if it is not brought to the council, to the government of that particular area, and it is cleared. That way, like I said earlier,
for accountability and transparency.
For accountability and transparency, as I said earlier, no traditional ruler worth his salt would sit down with elected councillors, and then they plan and steal some money. That's not going to happen. Now, more especially now, in most rural areas, what they use is motorcycles to gain access into the hinterland.
Okay.
Now, you can imagine, I know for a fact that in my state, only God knows the amount of money, the amount of resources that were channeled into this insecurity. Zamfara State, of course, as you know, is in the news every day about insecurity. But in my kingdom, I thank Almighty Allah, we happen to be the only, if I may say, the only, I don't want to boast, we happen to be the only emirate in Zamfara that is relatively safe. Why? I'm not beating my chest about it, because we employ certain measures. We talk to the local government chairman, look, chairman, please do this. But I have to use the word please, because he is the chief executive. I have no role to play. Like I was said earlier, my role is purely advisory. If he likes, he would say, this area is worrying me too much. Maybe next time I take up for, yeah, chairman, can you come? You say, please, I'm not around. I'm somewhere else. So going back to what Senator Lalong said, it would be better if clearly defined roles are given to traditional leaders for the betterment of everybody in this country. That is my take on this.
Justice Hassan, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I just would like to ask again, before we advocate, roles to be enshrined in the Constitution for the traditional institution, the public would really want to see or want to know what or how you are addressing, the challenges, at your various domains, even without having that constitutional backing. And that's why I want to bring in His Majesty Samuel Ikechukwu-Asado, as well as engineer Dr. Oji. How are you addressing the issues at the moment without constitutional rules, and what are the challenges that you are confronting that is hindering or impeding effective discharge of your duties?
Thank you so much. It's already stated. You see, it has what we call measure of success. From everything the senior advocate has said, from everything my fellow colleagues have said, we are talking about measure of success. We've had tremendous, and even the senator, have tremendous impact on the society because of the way things happen in this country, because insecurity is the number one challenge.
Let's take Enugu, for instance.
Well, Enugu is a work in progress. Our government is doing so good in security and, of course, infrastructure. That's coming them down. For me, it's a challenge because now I see where we're going, and they say where we're coming from. You see, that's what I'm talking about, constant changing. We need to change. Now we have measured the success that when you allow the communities to put out their kings without interference of politicians, it becomes safe, becomes better, because they know who they want to be their king. So most of the things we do, I'm going to advocate for just what we said, is even easier when you can see the lack of usage of proper use of the channels, the effect of it. Because when push comes to shove, everybody comes back to say, what do we do? That's what we're trying to see. Let's measure the success of what we do. It's a challenge because we don't have any, just like the justice have just said recently. Say, if you can call the local government chairman, he say, I'm busy. Or I'm in I traveled, I went to Lagos, I went to Abuja. And yet he's in the domain because he doesn't have to listen to you.
Do you have any particular experience to share with us? Experience such that has impacted on your ability, to
Of course,
Yes.
of course. It's every day. We see that every day because of what we call, and in Southeast area, we have what we call neighborhood watch. The people that, government, the local government imbibe to help them to do that.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard for the king of the kingdom to produce a leader of this. They go into the PG, as the President General of the Town Union, because they are given their powers and roles are all the same, even though they're elected and by the community, and then sometimes the government gets involved in that, and sometimes they will, after a while, they move, but they see them as rivals. So the PG will make a rule, the government will say, okay, we know the PG, and the king has already come for an adversary, and if the government of the day doesn't recognize the king's advice, we don't have we don't have a backup. We don't have anywhere to. So it's something is general because they see us as advisors.
So the neighborhood watch, don't take.
Yeah, you wouldn't, you will know who they are, but you know who they are not. So those are things that the senator is talking about. To be able to look inwards, we need to look inwards and see what they take our advice, of course, but sometimes they don't have to take it. That's what I'm trying to say. They don't have to listen to us. So it's going to be a very interesting topic to discuss, because even when we are doing all this, what are the measures of success? It will still go back to the bottom line. The bottom line is that we have to get it all involved and see that this has been the status quo. We just like as Inge said, so His Majesty, we need to add. It's not a matter of if, it's how do we make it so that we can even piggyback and pay back from 1999. What about those royal fathers that are gone, that went through this process and joined their ancestors?
Okay. There's so many questions to ask. Sorry,
Okay,
yes, I wanted
let's
the
get
urgent
his
to
own
also. Yes.
perspective from.
So the reason why we say you need constitutional role for traditional rulers is that today, depending on the personal capacity of a traditional ruler, you are able to do what you are able to do. The traditional ruler is the government that the people see. The traditional ruler is the sole person that if anything happens in the community, everybody gravitates to. And when they come, what the traditional ruler will ask himself, what can I do? Fortunately for us, as in many communities, traditional rulers happen to be people of capacity, people of means, people who are well exposed. So they draw on all that experience to provide some, relief to their people. So if
But
there
what is preventing you? That's what we want to know.
So let's take security, because that's a good one. In the Southeast, we have unknown gunmen, all kinds of things that are going on. And our governors do a lot to, battle the security, but they rely on intelligence from the traditional rulers. And the traditional rulers live in the community. And so when they come to you to say there is crisis in your community, what are you able to do? By the end of the day, today, the most the traditional ruler can do is to provide some intelligence, provide some advisory. What if the traditional ruler is able, before government mobilize their resources and all that, to at least do what we call the first attempt at quelling the crisis? If he has some role, if he's able to mobilize resources, but those resources are not available to him, so he has to wait. And that waiting could be dangerous. Lives could be lost, because a traditional ruler who knows what to do, who is capable, who is a former government functionary of high caliber, a judge, he's just waiting. He has no role, he has no levers to start addressing things before the next level of government comes in. So all we are saying is we require constitutional role for traditional rulers that enables them to mobilize resources as first responders.
Okay.
If there is flooding in your community, you have to be the first responder. Because the people who run to your palace, you have to accommodate them, you have to give them shelter, feeding for the time before state, federal government resources will come in.
Because you are the closest to the people.
You are the government they see.
First line of defense.
First line of defense.
Yes, we need to
All
take a break.
So we'll take a break. Thank you, His Eminence Engineer Dr. Oji. I will take a break now. When we come back, the conversation continues. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back. I guess, Demola, you were going to ask a question before we went on break, so let me pass the ball back to you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. I was actually going to go to His Majesty Obi Professor Epiphany Azinge, SAN in Asaba, the Asagba of Asaba. And because we've been talking here about, this proposed constitutional role for traditional rulers, there's likely to be, like we have been discussing, conflicts, within the powers between the local government, state government, and whatnot. How does it operate in other climes, and what can we borrow? How do we go about, resolving this issue of separation of powers?
Well, I don't think the issue will be that of resolving conflicts. Apparently, there might not be. Perhaps that's the more reason why we should posit that there should be clear defined constitutional rule, because where that obtains, then certainly the issue of conflict will not arise. But rather, when we allow things to flow the way they are, then certainly we are having conflicts. I've listened attentively to the position posited by Emir of Gumi and of course the Chairman Council of Chiefs in Enugu State. And these are clear examples of where the challenges are. But having said that, I believe that what we should be aspiring to achieve is to clearly define what the functions should be. Perhaps if we have in the Constitution spelled out, there is herein established a council for traditional rulers, we may not need to elaborate so much further. Rather, there could well be a schedule in the Constitution that will now succinctly capture all the areas that the mandate of the traditional ruler will be required. And it becomes a mandate prescribed by the Constitution. If we do that, it can span both the legislative arm, can go to executive functions, and it can even touch judicial, if not quasi-judicial functions. Let me tell you, I have observed, it is not a matter of research. In the few months or 6 months I've been in office, I can say without equivocation that most of the disputes in my own community, indeed almost 80% of them, if not more, are resolved by traditional rulers. They don't get to the normal court system that we have. And that is quite enormous. But in a situation wherein, after resolving some of this conflict, they will now start another journey through the customary courts, up the ladder, even going to the Supreme Court, is a major challenge on its own. These are issues that need to be spelled out. That members of the traditional institution are not part of the security architecture in terms of members of the Security Council is worrisome on its own. That shouldn't be the case. These are issues that I also believe should be well defined by the Constitution under the shadow that will clearly define the functions, the composition, and the membership of the Traditional Rulers Council. If we are able to achieve that, I don't believe that there's likelihood of any form of conflict because things are clearly defined and delineated. Again, in issues of boundary demarcation and issues arising from boundary dispute, I believe the traditional institutions, they have a role to play. And they play that so eminently well, and we cannot debate that. So here and there, we know that there are areas we can mention wherein, of course, we know that hitherto, there are representations in the Council of State. And that only evaporated after the 1999 Constitution came into force. It was there hitherto, it was there in 1979. Now, so we needed to have somebody, there's need for us to have somebody there that can articulate for us. It is not a question of using people when you want to use them, and at the apex where they need to articulate for their own people and on behalf of their people, being the custodians of the culture and customs of the people, they are nowhere to be seen. So I believe that the issue of conflict, I dare say, does not even arise. It is because of the conflict inherent that we're asking for the constitutional rule. Because once they are well articulated and well addressed constitutionally, there will be no question of conflict. If there is any, then the court will also interpret to make sure that the lines are well defined and the lines are clearly drawn. So that is my position as far as that is concerned.
Professor Asinge, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you once again. We'll hopefully return to you for your final, input into this conversation. Let's get back to jazz. And it's an interesting case. There's so many questions. I don't know how to pack them. But distinguished Senator Lalong, whatever that is, backed by the act of legislation, gets, the force of law. And it also, entails that framework is accompanied by the full complement, that is required for that office. Now, if we look at the traditional institution, we have the first-class chiefs, we have the second-class chiefs, we have the third-class chiefs. In terms of functions, I'm just wondering how that will, play out. And then, again, as Dr. Orji said, they will require resources, applicable to their offices and to the mandate that, the Act would have prescribed. And one of such will be funding. How do we begin to balance all of this? Your Excellencies, you are the sponsor of this bill.
Well, that will not be a problem. You are also aware that there is now a Supreme Court judgment saying that local government, giving autonomy to local governments, asking the federal government to send money directly to local governments. The effect of judgments like this is not saying that you send money to them and then people will start misappropriating or misapplying those funds. You've heard also from some of these traditional rulers, their predicaments, their challenges of funding. Now there's a constitutional amendment, general constitutional amendment going on. And that is why we're saying, by the time that you pass the law at the National Assembly, the Senate, and also is already there at the period of alteration of the Constitution, whatever are things that were envisaged are going to be conflict will also be addressed before the end of the constitutional amendment. We are not yet, we are going into the committee hearing. Maybe the politicians may not even complain, because what we are now saying is that people are going to complain. Who are the people that are complaining? We are the politicians that are now saying we need traditional rulers' input into addressing some of these issues of governance if we want to have good governance. So by the time we move into the final address and also the release of the constitutional amendments, all issues like this will be considered. We are only saying that let it now be that also the challenges of traditional institution involvement is also addressed. As we move into address it, all other things will come. I have not seen, even when we did the second reading, after the second reading, we are waiting for the public hearing. I have not seen any significant deviation or people opposing what we are saying. Now, if generally people are not opposing, it appears that Nigerians are also going towards what we are saying, what traditional rulers are likely to get. And so by the time they get that, we will know what we're going to do. I don't want to start preempting, because at the end of the day, without prejudice to what the Senate will say at the end of the day, In fact, this committee is not even going to be under my committee. The public hearing is not under my committee. The public hearing is under a separate committee. They are going to do that. But my role will be to defend the position that we are saying, to also defend the agitation for constitutional roles for traditional rulers.
Thank you very much, distinguished Senator Lalong, for that. Okay, let's come back to the studio and go back to His Highness Justice Lawal Hassan, the Emir. I just want to find out, in this proposed constitutional role for traditional rulers, what opportunities do you think will exist for traditional rulers to engage with contemporary issues, such as economic development, social justice, and so on and so forth?
Well, Damola, as you know, it was earlier referred to by my colleague S.A. Arrow, that if you look in the build-up of traditional rulers or traditional institutions in Nigeria now, you virtually have everyone. You have, actually it is said that there's kind of competition now between the military and the lawyers for appointment as traditional rulers, because you have many retired generals, and then you have many retired justices and the jurists, as you have just seen. Now, with that, it is very difficult for somebody who has like the Asaba of Asaba now, for him to go and stay in a cocoon in Asaba without keeping in touch with contemporary issues that are happening in the world today. Okay. So days have gone when you had unlettered, pardon my use of the word unlettered, when you have unlettered people as traditional rulers. You don't have any such people anymore. I believe everywhere now they make sure that the selection process brings up or throws out the best from that community. And the best from any community, of course, would like to keep in touch with contemporary modern issues so that his community is not left behind. That is my take on that. But now the larger picture. There is currently, in the legal profession, currently there is this wind of change blowing, the wind of, staying away from pure litigation and going back through to arbitration and settling disputes amicably without necessarily going to do the win-lose situation. If you go to court, there must be a winner and a loser. And if you have a sole loser, that he creates enmity, then you have a problem. So we are now gravitating towards a situation of win-win. And that is a situation whereby the two parties, like in a community, if there's a kind of, which happens every day now, you have farmers and herders dispute. You have all sorts of things like that. Now, in a situation like that, they go before the what do you call a mediator. Now, the traditional rulers had all the time been mediators. They have no job apart from mediating to ensure that there is peace and good governance in their communities. Now, I would suggest that each traditional institution in this country now keeps abreast of the basic concepts of alternative dispute resolution. That's ADR. I'm sure everyone now is people are getting used to that. There are various doors to this alternative dispute resolution. Before, you only had one door, one single door, which is the door that leads to litigation. Now, with ADR, you have different doors. It's like a house with different doors. You can now open any door you like. You can open the door of what you call early neutral evaluation. You can open the door of mediation. You can open the door of negotiation. All these concepts have different outcomes, but they are all for good.
Okay, I want to escalate this question. So, but I'll start from you.
Yes.
If you look at, yes, I'm really impressed with the caliber of traditional ruler. I'm so impressed, and I'm happy. I'm proud that we're having, unlike before, the perception of a traditional ruler. I mean, I don't want to describe it, but thank God that, still is evolving. But what has not evolved, or what is evolving, on the other side, is the allegiance, to the office of the executive governor of a state. You discover that in the past, the traditional ruler is either by succession or by inheritance. Today, a traditional ruler is appointed by the state executive. I don't know, but I'm sure that's the case.
That's the issue of politicization.
Yes, that's the case.
Institution.
Now, and there have been situations where some traditional rulers have differed with their state executives on,
a choice.
Yes, on a particular measure to address a situation. What happens in that instance?
Good question. You are now talking about securing the tenure of the traditional rulers all over the country. We have recently heard of different cases where there's a conflict between the governor and the chief executive of a state and a traditional ruler who believes that he should fight for his people. Now, that's quite worrisome for us. We don't want a situation whereby a governor will wake up and just say, because you did not support my political party, or because you didn't support me during the campaign, I'm going to remove you and I'm going to put somebody that has actually assisted us in the campaign. So we urge Senator Lalong and other members, distinguished members of the National Assembly, to come to our assistance, to come up with a position, to come up with a solution, to come up with a remedy to this problem. We want to be under an independent body that would recommend the removal from office of a traditional ruler in case of clear and proven misconduct. That's what all of us are agreed upon. We want to be subjected to the review of our peers, kind of. Maybe like in, let's say, in Enugu State, for instance, or Abia State, for instance. If there's an allegation against an OB or an Eze, we don't want that matter to be determined purely or simply by the governor. We want the allegations to be clearly itemized, forwarded to the alleged misconduct, or the person who did the misconduct, let him respond, and his response and the allegations should be tabled before the Abia State Council of Chiefs, or a body created for that purpose. Then he will appear before the body and defend himself before his peers. These are all OBs and Ezes and other traditional rulers. And he will be able to defend himself there. If he cannot defend himself there, then that body will now recommend to the removing authority.
Okay, Your Highness, because of time, we just have less than 5 more minutes, and we want everyone to just speak. Let's have your parting shot on this issue.
Yes, it is clearly defined. His Highness said it all. Alternative dispute resolution. We need to have a awareness. Okay. And like I said, change is constant. We need to keep updating our mind. Even the traditional laws that have been there for long, to have this orientation, because the courts are they find alternative to mediation, ADR, arbitration, and I recently concluded a course with Pens and Voices in Enugu recently, where I learned a lot of things about how to have contracting with the negotiating parties, mediating parties. You have to have contract with them. You have to have you have to have a measure of success, like I said. So we have to say, okay, what is it? So in all intents and purposes, we're here soliciting for the amendment of the Constitution. The schedules, just like the senior advocate said, and the sponsor of the bill said, will be itemized. The finances will be ironed out. Those things will come down to play because there are experts in this field. So what we're here talking about today is, my last comment will be like, okay, to just enable us to have that legislation inclusion, inclusiveness, recognition, and understanding, then the other things will come into play. So I want to thank the whole parties that are involved in this. I want to thank the president for having this. I want to thank my governor. I want to thank the senator, of course, the speaker, Pabio. And of course, they're all involved in this.
Okay, so we want to thank you too. Also.
And the NTA.
And the
Let's Dr. Oji, how do we resolve that? Yes.
So my part in short is basically to say we have made a very robust case for constitutional recognition for traditional rulers in Nigeria. I think we want to go to the next level to ask Nigerians for their voice in the conversation. That's the public hearing. Okay. We're looking forward to a successful public hearing. There is no Nigerian that doesn't come from a community with a traditional ruler. So this is opportunity for Nigerians to support their traditional rulers to ensure that we have a successful legislation that guarantees a place in the constitution for traditional rulers.
Okay, let's go to Asaba now, where we have Professor Asinge SAN. Sir, your concluding view.
Well, I believe the case made so far remains unassailable, and I believe that is one that can sell clearly to our people, the people of Nigeria. And we're only waiting for the time that this will become a fait accompli. And we want to thank the political personalities, including Senator Lalong, for championing this cause, amongst others. And I believe that with the public hearing, it will be smooth sailing. And I look forward to a return to constitutional imprimatur on the role of traditional rulers. Thank you very much for having me.
Get a last word in 60 seconds from the Senator Lalong. What if this doesn't go through again? What happens?
No, but grace of God, it will go through because we have been encouraged, like I said, from the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It was part of our campaign. Two, I must also thank my distinguished Senate President, Senator Akpabio, and all the principal officers for the encouragement, because on the second day of deliberations, you need to see how senators were contributing. And finally, look forward to also people coming on the day of the public hearing to contribute, so that at the end of the day, we must have this bill passed.
Distinguished Senator Lalong there, the sponsor of the bill. Senator Simon Bako Lalong is the senator representing Plateau South Senatorial District and former governor of Plateau State. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. On Good Morning Nigeria. Also, let's just come to the studio and thank His Highness Justice Lawal Hassan, OFR Emir of Gumi and Chairman Coordinating Committee Northern Traditional Rulers Council. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you, Demola, for having me.
All right. And His Royal Majesty Igwe's Sir Samuel Ikechukwu, Ani Oguga, Asian Kingdom, Usuka, and Chairman Enugu State Traditional Rulers. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. God bless you.
His Eminence, Engineer Dr. Eberechukwu Oji Eze Arochukwu of Kingdom. Thank you so much, sir, for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And the last but not the least, want to just thank the Asagba of Asaba, Professor Epiphany Azinge, SAN, His Majesty. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us for this conversation this morning.
It's a pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, okay.
Well, we missed Deji of Akure. He was to join us, but we unfortunately. All right, so.
Well, Claire, this is where we have to sign off. I am Ademola Adeyo. Thank you so much for joining us. Claire.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdurrazak. Bye-bye.